The city of Lagos buzzed with its usual evening chaos. Car horns, shouting vendors, and heavy rain painted the streets in a blur of sound and water. Inside a small roadside restaurant, everything moved like routine. Plates clattered, customers laughed, and amidst it all was Sarah, a young waitress who moved from table to table like clockwork. She wore an old pair of shoes, and her apron was slightly stained. Her smile never quite reached her eyes, but she kept it anyway. It was the kind of smile life forces you to wear when your world is crumbling. Her rent was overdue. Her mother was sick back in the village, and her boss had warned her about being late again. Just one more shift. Just make it through tonight. She balanced a tray of steaming jollof rice as she passed the glass door at the front. Something made her glance outside, just for a second, but it stopped her in her tracks. There, sitting on a wooden bench, was a little boy. All alone, soaked to the bone in the pouring rain. His head was bowed. A white cane rested beside him. Sarah's heart skipped. She quickly turned to the cashier and asked, "Who's that boy outside?" The cashier glanced up. "Came earlier with a man. The man's in his car now, taking some Zoom call or whatever. He left the boy in the rain?" Sarah's eyebrows shot up. The cashier shrugged, indifferent. "Looks like it." Sarah turned back toward the door. The rain had picked up. The boy hadn't moved. Not even a little. Something tugged at her chest. A deep pull, like instinct. She placed the tray on an empty table, wiped her hands on her apron, and without saying a word rushed toward the door. The wind hit her first, then the cold drops soaked into her sleeves and hair as she stepped outside. The boy was still there. Still silent, still shivering, she knelt beside him gently. "Hey," she said softly, her voice nearly lost in the rain. "You're getting soaked. Come with me, please. You can't sit out here like this." The boy turned his head slightly. His face was wet, not just from the rain, but from tears. I'm okay," he said quietly. Sarah didn't believe him. "What's your name?" she asked, brushing hair from his forehead with the napkin she pulled from her apron pocket. "Jacob," he said. She smiled softly. "Hi, Jacob, I'm Sarah. I'm going to take you inside, okay? Just for a few minutes, don't worry." He didn't argue. He stood slowly, carefully taking her hand, clutching his cane in the other. She led him back into the restaurant, past the curious stares of customers, and sat him near the window where it was warm and dry. She knelt beside him again and wiped his face gently. His skin was cold. "Are you okay now?" she asked again. He nodded slowly. "He told me to wait." "Who? The man who brought you?" He nodded again. "Doesn't matter," she said gently. "You're cold and wet. I'll get you something warm to eat, okay?" "No." "He doesn't like me talking to people," Jacob whispered. Sarah looked at him carefully, and something inside her cracked. "You're not disturbing anyone. You're just being human." She stood and walked into the kitchen, her mind still on the boy. She had no spare money, not even enough to cover her own dinner, but she didn't care. She scooped the last plate of hot jollof rice meant for a customer and placed it on a clean dish. When she returned, Jacob was still sitting quietly, hands in his lap. She placed the plate in front of him and smiled. "Here, hot jollof, you'll like it." Jacob turned his head. "For me?" "Yes," she said, gently sitting beside him. "Let me help you." He didn't resist. She picked up the spoon and fed him the first bite. He chewed slowly, then gave a small nod. "It's nice. Very nice." Sarah smiled. "Good, there's more." Spoon by spoon he ate quietly, and then something magical happened. He smiled, a real pure smile. "Thank you, Mom," he whispered. "You're very kind." Sarah paused. That small thank you, that quiet gratitude. It hit her harder than any paycheck ever had. "You're welcome, Jacob," she said softly. "You're safe now." But deep down a question echoed in her heart. Why would anyone leave a blind boy alone in the rain? She looked out the glass toward the parking lot. Who was his father, and why wasn't he here? Desmond's hands hovered over his laptop keyboard inside the black SUV parked across the street. Rain tapped softly against the roof, a calm rhythm that barely registered in his mind. He was in the middle of a tense video call with foreign investors, his headset snug in place, his voice steady. "Let's finalize the numbers," he said flatly. But just as the figures came up on the screen, a crack of thunder flashed outside. Desmond flinched slightly. His eyes instinctively turned toward the bench where he'd left Jacob. Empty. His breath caught. He straightened up instantly, scanning the sidewalk, his fingers frozen over the keyboard. The boy was gone. His heart slammed, hard in his chest. Without even ending the call, he pulled off his headset and turned his eyes toward the restaurant. Then he saw it, through the clear glass window, his son, sitting at a small table, smiling, and beside him was a young woman in a soaked apron. She was kneeling. She was wiping Jacob's face gently like a mother would. Her lips moved slowly, her eyes soft with care. Desmond stared. His son, who rarely smiled, who had learned to eat in silence, who had grown up in rooms full of wealth but starved of warmth, was smiling. Because of her. He slowly closed the laptop. His hands rested on it, but he didn't move. He didn't blink. He just sat there. Outside, the rain had softened to a drizzle. Inside his chest, something stirred. Small, quiet, unfamiliar. It wasn't guilt. It wasn't shame. It was something else. It was feeling. Desmond exhaled and reached for the door. When he stepped out into the misty air, it was like walking into a memory that didn't belong to him. He crossed the road slowly, his expensive shoes soaking slightly with each step. His suit was sharp, his shoulders squared, but inside, he felt strangely vulnerable. The bell above the restaurant door chimed softly as he entered. Warmth hit him first, then the smell of spice and food, but his eyes didn't wander. He saw her immediately. Sarah. She was still beside Jacob, helping him finish the plate of food. Her back was bent slightly, her hands careful. She wasn't rushing, she wasn't doing it for attention. She simply cared. Desmond stood silently for a few seconds. He had seen his son eat 1,000 meals, but never like this. Never with joy. Jacob turned his head suddenly. "Dad?" he said, his voice gentle. Sarah looked up, surprised. Desmond slowly knelt beside his son. For the first time in years, he touched Jacob's hand with care. It was still cold. "I'm sorry," he said quietly, his voice breaking. "I shouldn't have left you out there." Jacob didn't say anything at first. "It's okay, Dad," he finally whispered. Desmond shook his head. "No, it's not. You matter. You're my son, and I should have treated you like it." He looked at Sarah now. Her face was unsure, her hands still holding the napkin. Desmond stood up and faced her. "Directly. Thank you," he said sincerely, "for taking care of him." Sarah shifted nervously. "I just did what anyone should do." "No," Desmond said with a small smile. "Not everyone would have done it." He paused. "What's your name?" "Sarah," she replied. He nodded. "Thank you, Sarah. I won't forget what you did." He turned back to Jacob. "Ready to go home, son?" Jacob nodded with a quiet smile. "Yes, Dad." Together they walked out, and for the first time in years Desmond felt something in his chest that wasn't cold. He felt hope. That night, Sarah returned to her small rented room. The bulb flickered. There was no food. Her back hurt from standing all day. Her rent was still unpaid. She sat down on the edge of her bed, took off her shoes and pulled her knees close to her chest. Tears came slowly, silently, not loud, not dramatic, just quiet, tired tears. "How will I survive?" she whispered. No answer, just the ticking of her old clock, but then her mind drifted back to the boy, to Jacob, to the way he had smiled at her, the way he had said, "You are very kind," and somehow that memory made her smile too. A small, tired, honest smile. "At least I made someone happy today," she whispered. She held on to that thought, like a thread in the dark, and across town Desmond sat alone in his mansion staring at nothing. But his mind was on Sarah, on her kindness. On the moment his son smiled like that, for the first time in years, he picked up his phone. "Hello?" his driver answered. "Tomorrow," Desmond said, "I want you to find out who she is. That waitress. Quietly. No names, no details. I just want to know more. Yes, sir, the driver replied. Desmond ended the call. Something had begun to shift, and it was only the beginning. 3 days passed. Sarah hadn't thought much about the rich man since that rainy night. She was too busy trying to survive. Rent was still due. Her landlord had come again, knocking louder this time. Her mother's medicine was running low. Life was still hard, just like always. That evening, as the sun dipped low, she swept the tiny corridor outside her room. Her hands moved slow, her mind heavy. Then there was a knock, not the loud, angry kind, just a firm, quiet tap. Sarah turned toward the door, confused. No one ever visited her, not here. She opened it slowly and froze. Standing in front of her, dressed in a clean grey suit holding a brown envelope, was Desmond. Her eyes widened. "Sir, you," she whispered. Desmond gave a soft smile. "Hello, Sarah. I hope I'm not coming too late." No, sir, please. Come in." She stepped aside nervously, brushing her scarf back over her head. Desmond looked around as he entered. The room was tiny. A small bed, a cracked fan, a chair with one leg slightly chipped, but everything was spotless. He sat on the edge of the chair and placed the envelope on her small table. Sarah stood quietly, unsure. "I saw what you did for my son," Desmond said, his voice low. "And I haven't stopped thinking about it since." Sarah looked down. "It was nothing, sir. He looked cold and hungry. I just helped." Desmond's eyes softened. "No, it wasn't nothing. It was everything. You saw him. You cared. Not everyone would." He gently pushed the envelope forward. "Please, open it." Sarah picked it up slowly, her fingers trembling. She expected money, maybe something small as a thank you, but inside wasn't cash. It was a letter. Her eyes scanned the first few lines. Then she looked up at him, stunned. Job offer?" she asked quietly. Desmond nodded. "Yes, I want you to work for my company. A proper position, human relations assistant. You'll be dealing with people, listening, helping. Exactly what you're good at." She looked at the paper again. "I don't understand." "There's more," Desmond added gently. "The job comes with a new place to live. Quiet, clean, safe. No more worrying about rent." Sarah stared at him. Words didn't come. Her mouth opened, then closed again. He smiled slightly. "You have something rare, Sarah. Kindness. Presence. You don't just speak. You see people. My company needs that. I need that." She sat slowly on the edge of the bed, tears forming in her eyes. But this time, not from pain. Desmond stood. "You don't have to decide now. My driver will come tomorrow morning. If you're ready, he'll bring you." He nodded once, then walked to the door. Sarah stood there, holding the paper to her chest, watching him leave. The room felt small still, but somehow, that night, it didn't feel as heavy. She didn't sleep much. Her mind ran in circles. What if it was a trick? What if she failed? What if people laughed? But somewhere deep inside, something whispered, "You deserve more than just survival." Morning came fast. Sarah stood in front of the tall glass building in the heart of the city. Her hair was tied back neatly, her best dress ironed. She clutched her small bag tight, her legs shaking slightly. People moved in and out of the building, suits, phones, heels clicking across the floor. When she stepped inside, heads turned. She felt it. Those quick glances, the subtle whispers. Who is she? Where? Did she come from? But she didn't stop. Desmond was waiting at the top floor just outside his office. "You made it," he said with a small smile. "Yes, sir," Sarah replied, her voice soft but steady. "Come," he said. "Let me show you around." He walked with her through the office hallways. People stared. Some nodded politely. Some pretended not to look. Others didn't bother hiding their judgment. Sarah kept walking. Desmond noticed. He stopped and turned to her in the hallway. "You don't need to try to impress anyone here," he said calmly. Just be yourself, speak honestly, listen. You already have what matters most. Sarah nodded slowly. Okay. Later that week, Desmond called her into his office. There's a board meeting, he said. Things are tense. I think your voice might help. Me? She blinked. He nodded. Just speak from your heart, like you did with Jacob. She followed him into the boardroom. Men in suits turned and looked. Some raised their brows. One even whispered under his breath, "What is she doing here?" Sarah sat silently at first, listening. Then she stood up slowly. "I know I'm new here," she said clearly. "I don't have all the right business words, but I know people. People do their best work when they feel seen, when they feel heard." The room fell silent. "If we treat our workers like they matter," she continued, "this company will grow." One man chuckled. "It's not that simple." "Maybe it should be," Sarah said gently. That changed something. Heads nodded. The air shifted. And Desmond, who rarely smiled, almost did. When the meeting ended, no one laughed anymore. They listened. Sarah had come from the rain, the noise, the struggle. Now she stood in a boardroom, shaping decisions, and this was only the beginning. After that meeting, something shifted inside the building. Sarah wasn't just the girl Desmond brought in anymore. People started greeting her, some out of respect, others out of cautious curiosity. She didn't wear heels or designer clothes. She didn't use big corporate language. But whenever she spoke, people listened. Her calm voice and honest tone softened the tension in rooms even Desmond used to struggle in. But not everyone liked the change, especially not Mr. Frank. He had been at the C company for 6 years, loyal, punctual, and strategic. He dreamed of moving higher. He saw himself someday sitting where Desmond sat. But instead, a former waitress had walked in and within weeks was invited into board meetings, praised openly and trusted deeply. He watched her through the glass walls of his office. She was writing in a notebook, smiling slightly, focused. "She won't last," he muttered. "I'll make sure of it." That evening, after most of the staff had gone home, Sarah stayed back to finish up reports. The office lights were dimmer now, the building quieter. She packed her things slowly, humming under her breath. Suddenly the door opened behind her. "Good evening, Sarah," said a soft voice. She turned. It was Mr. Frank, standing with a polite smile. "Oh, good evening, sir." He walked in slowly, hands in his pockets. "I'm sorry to disturb you. My laptop's acting strange. Could I use your system for just a minute? Need to check a file urgently." Sarah blinked. "Sure. Of course." She stepped aside without a second thought. Mr. Frank sat down, pulled a small flash drive from his pocket, and plugged it into the computer. His fingers moved fast. Click, type, attach, send, all in under 1 minute. "Thank you," he said, standing up as smoothly as he came in. "No problem, sir," Sarah replied politely. He left the room quietly. Sarah didn't think twice about it until 3 days later. Desmond sat at his desk, face hard, eyes fixed on a printed document. He picked up the phone. "Send Sarah in." Minutes later, she entered his office. Her face looked worried. "Good morning, sir." He nodded, then pushed the document toward her. "Sarah," he said, "this email was sent from your work account 2 nights ago." She picked it up and read slowly. Her heart nearly stopped. It was a company account statement, highly confidential, the kind of information board members guard with their lives. And her email was the sender. Her voice trembled. "Sir, this is my name, but I didn't send this. I didn't even open this file." Desmond studied her face. "I know," he said finally. "I don't believe you did, but the board has seen it, and some of them are not so forgiving." "Why would someone do this?" she whispered. "Why frame me?" Desmond leaned back in his chair. "Maybe someone doesn't like how fast you've risen. Maybe they think you don't belong here." Sarah sat down slowly, holding the paper tightly. "Am I in trouble?" she asked, her voice small. Desmond sighed. "You might be, unless we find out who actually did it. And we have to do it quietly. No one else can know we're investigating, not yet." She nodded, fighting tears. "Thank you for believing me," she said softly. Desmond looked her in the eyes. "I see people, Sarah. I know the real from the fake. You are real. That. Tight?" The office lights stayed on longer than usual. Desmond and Sarah sat side by side going through access logs, camera records, login timestamps. She was tired, her back ached, but she didn't stop. "We'll find them," she said. Desmond nodded. "We will." Then, 2 nights later, Sarah gasped. "Wait," she pointed at the screen. "Look at this timestamp." Desmond leaned closer. "Mr. Frank." His login time matched the exact moment the email was sent. Sarah's eyes widened. "That evening, he came into my office, said his laptop wasn't working. I let him use mine." Desmond sat back slowly. "He waited for you to turn your back, and he framed you." Her hands shook. "Why would he do this to me?" Desmond's face darkened. "Because he wanted you gone." Silence settled over the room like a cold blanket. Then Desmond stood. "Now we have proof." Sarah stood with him. "What do we do now?" Desmond's jaw tightened. "Now, we end it." The boardroom was silent. All the senior members of Babs plc sat around the long, polished table. Their faces were stiff, their voices low. Something was wrong, and everyone felt it. One of the directors, a man with thick glasses and a grey tie, leaned forward. "Let's call her in. If she's going to be held accountable, she deserves a chance to speak." Another added, "This is a serious breach. Confidential company data was leaked. If the sender's name is on it, it's not a small matter." At the far end of the room, Mr. Frank sat silently, a half smile on his lips. Then the door opened. Sarah stepped in. She wasn't wearing anything flashy, just a simple blue blouse and black pants, but she walked with purpose. Her fingers clutched a brown file close to her chest. She stood at the head of the room. No shaking, no tears, only resolve. Desmond sat nearby but had remained quiet the whole time, his expression unreadable. One of the board members cleared his throat. "Miss Sarah, you know why you've been summoned?" Sarah nodded calmly. "Yes. You think I leaked the company's financial statement." "Did you?" another asked sharply. "No," Sarah answered clearly, "and I can prove it." She stepped forward and placed the brown file on the table. Inside were the log reports, access records, and exact timestamps pulled from the company's security system. "This email was sent from my office computer," she said. "But it wasn't sent by me." She turned her eyes toward the man sitting halfway across the table. "It was sent by Mr. Frank." Mr. Frank scoffed. "That's a bold claim, and a very dangerous one." Sarah didn't flinch. "You came into my office after hours, said your laptop wasn't working. You asked to use my system for 1 minute. I trusted you. I stepped out for just a second. That's when the email was sent." "Even if I did log in," Mr. Frank said, his voice still calm, "that doesn't prove I sent anything." Desmond finally spoke. "But it does. We checked. The exact timestamp when the email was sent. It matches your login, down to the second." He turned to the rest of the board. "None of us want internal sabotage. But this wasn't a mistake. It was calculated." Another board member flipped. "Through the log sheet." His face tightened. "This is serious," he said. "You tried to frame her?" Still, Mr. Frank said nothing. Desmond stood. He almost succeeded. Sarah would have lost her job, her reputation, maybe even her peace of mind. All because someone couldn't handle seeing someone new rise. A silence fell over the room. One of the older women at the end of the table spoke softly. "Miss Sarah, I'm sorry you had to go through this. You showed restraint and courage." Another added, "You defended yourself with facts, not tears. That speaks volumes." Mr. Frank finally spoke, but not with defense. He stood slowly and muttered, "This is ridiculous." But Desmond stepped forward, eyes sharp. "I trusted you, Frank, and this is how you repay this company." Frank said nothing. Desmond turned to the rest of the room. "As CEO, I cannot allow this kind of behavior. Today we draw the line." He looked back at Frank. "You're fired. Effective immediately. You can leave now." For a second, Frank stood there, shocked, then stepped away from the table. His steps were slow, his pride heavier than his briefcase. No one looked him in the eye as he walked out. The door shut behind him, and silence remained. Sarah turned toward Desmond. She didn't speak, but her eyes said, "Thank you." Desmond gave a small nod, the kind that says, "I saw you fight." and I'm proud. That night, Sarah sat by her apartment window. The breeze was gentle. Her phone buzzed with messages, congratulations, support, even apologies from colleagues who had once looked down on her. But all she could think about was Jacob, the boy with the soft smile. The boy who unknowingly brought her into this world. Across town, Desmond tucked Jacob into bed. The boy smiled as his father stroked his hair gently. "Dad?" Jacob asked. "Yes, son?" "Did Sarah win?" Desmond smiled. "Yes, she did." Jacob turned his head slightly, resting against the pillow. "Good. She deserves to win." Desmond kissed his forehead. "I think she's just getting started." Weeks passed. The air around Desmond's office felt lighter these days. People smiled more. Meetings weren't just stiff exchanges. They became real conversations. And at the center of it all was Sarah. She didn't act like she owned the place. But people listened when she spoke. Her calm presence had slowly changed the way the company felt, and Desmond, too, was changing. He laughed more now. He came to work earlier, but he also left earlier to spend time with Jacob. At home, Jacob was happier than ever. He would wait eagerly by the door every evening, holding his white cane loosely and listening for the sound of his father's car pulling in. And more often than not, Sarah would come with him, not just as a visitor, but as something more. She would help Jacob with his Braille lessons. She'd sit beside him and tell stories, her voice warm and filled with magic. Sometimes they cooked together, or sang, or simply laughed at nothing. Jacob adored her. Desmond noticed it, of course, but more than that, he felt it too. One quiet night after dinner, Desmond and Jacob sat on the couch. The lights were low, the house peaceful. "Jacob," Desmond said softly, "can I ask you something?" Jacob turned his head toward his father, his little hand resting on Desmond's arm. "Of course, Dad." Desmond hesitated a little. "How do you feel when Sarah's here?" Jacob smiled. "Happy, like the house is alive. She talks to me, she listens." Desmond nodded slowly. "Do you like her?" Jacob laughed. "I love her." Desmond looked at him for a long time. Then he asked carefully, "What if she became part of our family? Like your mommy?" Jacob froze for a second, then gasped. "Really, can she?" "I want to ask her," Desmond said, "but I wanted to talk to you first." Jacob reached out and hugged his father tightly. "Yes, Daddy, please, please ask her." Desmond held him back. His eyes were moist, but his smile was calm. That weekend, he took Sarah to a quiet rooftop restaurant overlooking the city. The lights were soft, the sky full of stars, and gentle music drifted in the air. They ate slowly, talking like they always did, about everything and nothing, and then Desmond leaned forward. "Sarah," he said, his voice serious but warm, "I have something to say." She put down her fork, sensing the shift. "You brought life back into my son," he said, "but you also brought light into my heart. I haven't felt this alive in years. I don't see you as the girl from that rainy day anymore. I see you as someone I need in my life." Sarah's eyes widened, but she didn't interrupt. "I want you in my family, not just for Jacob, for me. Sarah, will you marry me?" Her breath caught. Her heart raced. For a second, the city disappeared. It was just him and his voice. She hesitated. "Desmond, this is a big decision. Please, give me some time to think." He nodded gently. "Take all the time you need." 1 week later, she came to his house. Jacob heard her voice first and ran to the door, his cane tapping the floor quickly. "Sarah," she laughed and bent down to hug him. Desmond stepped into the living room, watching quietly. Sarah stood up, took a deep breath, and smiled. "Yes," Desmond blinked. "Yes?" She nodded. "Yes, I will marry you." Jacob cheered loudly, clapping his hands. "Yay!" Desmond walked up slowly and pulled her into a hug. For a long time, none of them said anything. There was no need. Everything had been said already, with actions, with silence, with care. Months passed. The wedding was small and private. No press, no cameras, just people who mattered, people who had seen the worst and still stayed kind. Sarah moved into the house with Jacob and Desmond. But it never felt like moving in. It felt like coming home. At the company, her title changed again. She was now head of people and culture. But titles didn't matter much to her. What mattered was that people smiled more, that Desmond laughed more, that Jacob had someone who read him stories every night and kissed him goodnight on both cheeks. Sometimes Sarah would stand by the window late at night and think about the rain, about that one evening when she'd seen a lonely boy on a bench, about how that simple choice down to care changed everything. She didn't have money or power or influence. She only had a heart that noticed, and it was enough because in a world full of people rushing past, she chose to stop, and in return, the universe gave her everything she never dared to ask for: love, family, purpose, from waitress to wife, from kindness to a kingdom.